With no further ado, I want to introduce Steve Costello. Steve, you want to come up?
Thanks.
So Steve is the Vice President of Green Mountain Power, but I'm not sure what Mary Powell pays him to do, who's the CEO of Green Mountain Power, because Steve is one of those leaders in a community that drives ideas. And so about a week ago, there was an article in the Rutland Herald I read where Rutland Bloom was doing some other work around beautification of the city. And I thought it would be a good opportunity because Steve has a very unique perspective on what happens in a community when you change environment and how people feel about their community once the environment changes. So I asked him to come down and say a few words about that, and maybe we can open up the question and answers.
Sure.
And with that, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you. And thanks for making, and furthermore, I know Steve was in Colchester today, so he literally drove from Colchester to here to be here tonight, so I appreciate that.
No problem. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. I'll try to be really brief and just then answer as many questions if people have them. So, Rutland Blooms, my job at GMP is I'm Vice President. It's a weird title, believe it or not. This is my real title. Vice President for Customer Service, Metering, and Ambassador to Rutland. And the reason for that is when GMP and CVPS merged many years ago, 5 years ago, a lot of people in Rutland were really nervous about the merger because CVPS was a huge part of the community. We had been headquartered there since 1929, and people were really fearful that the things that we had been involved in for so long in Rutland would go away after the merger. So we made a really strong commitment not to do that, to ensure that we stayed connected to the community and worked with the community on a host of things. And Project Vision actually gave us a great opportunity to do that. And we continue to be involved in Project Vision today, whatever, it's been what, 8 years, 10 years almost, since it started. So Rutland Blooms was an offshoot of Project Vision. I was actually at a Rutland City Police Commission meeting because of my involvement in Project Vision, and Jim actually was talking about that whole concept of if you change the environment, you change the behavior in that environment. And I forget the exact example he used, but the one I like to use is going to a wedding. You put on a suit, you put on a dress, people tend to behave a lot better in those clothes than they might if they're wearing their jeans and their tank tops and stuff like that. And that really, when Jim made the analogy that he used, it really struck me. And I think it's true. People behave much differently depending on where they are and who's around them and stuff, and what the place they're in looks like. And Rutland, frankly, at the time was, when Project Vision first started and when we started Rutland Blooms, was probably at one of its lowest points. Project Vision is a direct result of a serious epidemic of opioid use. And the city's made humongous progress, and thanks in large part to Jim and Mayor Louris, who really led that effort. But I thought, from my perspective, in my role at GMP and in the community, what could we do that would involve a lot of people and get them thinking about the community a little differently, whether they were involved specifically in the project or not. And so we came up with this idea. It started out, sounds really corny, but it really did work. The original idea was, let's plant millions of flowers and just make this place a place that people really think of when they hear about flowers, or when they come through this place will be known for that. And we started doing that for a while, and what we really learned quickly is the growing season in Vermont is so short that to do something like that, it was really labor intensive, stuff dies quick, and it didn't really have the long-lasting impact that we wanted it to have. So we very quickly transitioned to planting flowering crabapple trees. And we started with some of the most run-down areas in town, gateways to the community that look, there was one, West Street in particular. If you're coming from West Rutland into the city of Rutland, there's a trash sorting plant, there's a railroad side yard, there's a sewage treatment plant, all visible from Route 4 as you're driving in. And so today there are 75 flowering crabapples that are starting to block the view of those three things. And they're only 6-8 feet tall right now after being in the ground for 2 years. But in another couple of years, they're going to really, they've already changed dramatically the impact as you come in from that direction. So that's just one example. And the funny thing about it is, even when we planted them and they were only this tall or this tall, just putting them in the ground, that was all people talked about for a week in Rutland, I swear. It had a huge impact. And it got 50 some odd people involved who helped plant those things. We did it all, other than the city forester who, you know, has the expertise and knows where to put things and what kind of plants to use and all that stuff. It's all been done with volunteer labor. It's also been done without any tax money. Everything Rutland Blooms has done, which now includes probably close to 1,000 flowering crabapples planted throughout the city, some big maples planted in key places that were really needing something bigger than a 10-foot tree. We've done it all through donations. And it's been really simple. It sounds like, oh, this sounds like a huge project, lots of work. I probably spend, including 2 days planting, less than 25 hours a year on this, personally. And that includes recruiting the money, recruiting the volunteers, and then spending 2 days or parts of 2 days actually planting with the volunteers. What I found really quickly, when you get a little bit of energy behind something like this, it becomes contagious really, really fast. So, I basically started calling my friends, large employers, telling them what we were trying to do, and asking them point blank for whatever I knew that they were in a position to be able to do. So, the GEs and the Vermont Country Stores, I asked for $5,000 or $10,000. The local, florist shop, I asked for $50 or what have you. And we've spent the last 5 years a little over $100,000, all of it donated. We also have expanded the focus. So we're still going to keep doing flower and crab apples. We did a huge planting in the Northwest neighborhood, which was really a focal point for Project Vision and continues to be a focal point. It's a really dense neighborhood, a lot of rental housing, a lot of absentee landlords, and a lot of problems. And Project Vision and the police department have made a huge impact, reduced crime dramatically in that neighborhood, improved quality of life dramatically in that neighborhood. And through Project Vision, we have planted a couple of hundred flowering crabapples in that 8 square block area. That alone, it sounds so corny, but it has made a huge impact about the people, how they look and feel about their neighborhood. And that certainly hasn't been the only thing that's happened there. There's been a lot of investment in that neighborhood. Green Mountain Power has done a couple of home renovations, energy renovations. NeighborWorks, which is a local housing group, which is actually active down here as well, and could be a good partner for you in this area. NeighborWorks in Western Vermont, they're based in West Rutland, and they do a lot of really good work. They've done several home renovations and resales, and what we have found really quickly with all this work in that neighborhood, when you do a couple of improvements, the people who are next to the improvements suddenly realize how bad their place looks, and especially if they're owner-occupied, it does have a cascading effect. So the neighborhood has gone 180 degrees from where it was. There's still progress to be made, but it's really, really grown in a big way and had a huge impact. The next step for Rutland Blooms, we're going to keep planting trees, we're going to keep encouraging people to volunteer and to donate money, but we've, in the last year, started a much bigger plan. I was out west just about a year ago, went hiking with my wife in South Dakota, and we flew into Rapid City, which is a, 60,000 population city. Had no intention of spending any time there at all. Landed, got our rental car, and started driving to Custer State Park, which is like a national park. It's a huge state-owned park, but really spectacular. And we're heading through the downtown, and some artwork, public art caught our eye, so we stopped to check it out. And what it was a sculpture a little bigger than life size of one of the US presidents. And it was really cool, it was done in bronze, really spectacular. And we look across the street and there's another one. And we look down the street, there's another one. They have every US president in their downtown in life-size sculptures that cost a lot of money to put in, but have become a massive tourist draw. And by the time I got back to Vermont a week later, I had an idea to, working with our marble industry and right up the road, the Danby Quarry, start doing public art using Vermont history, not US presidents, but Vermont history. And we've commissioned 3 already. Again, no state or no city money. The first one, Green Mountain Power split the cost of it with a local developer, Mark Foley. And it's a 10-foot high sculpture of a stone sculptor. Rutland was really built on the stone industry, and it's going to go right in the heart of downtown. It's finished. It's going to be installed in the spring. Told this story to the local bookstore owner, and his immediate reaction was, well, how can I get involved? I said, I don't know, you can give me a lot of money and we'll do a sculpture related to a book. And his favorite book was The Jungle Book, which just happened to be written in southern Vermont by the author lived in Vermont at the time that it was written. And so if you go onto Center Street in Rutland right now, it's about twice the width of this, but it's kind of like this. It's a big podium with a giant book on top of it, and it's The Jungle Book open, and the characters from the book are coming off it in 3 dimensions, all carved out of stone. It's really gorgeous. The third one is going to be carved this spring and installed in the fall of 2018, and it's going to be a larger-than-life sculpture of a woman named Anne Story, who was during the Revolutionary War times, lived in Rutland briefly, and then moved to Salisbury, which was the frontier at that time, totally undeveloped, no roads or anything. And she became a spy for Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, and was ultimately responsible for the capture of 13 British spies who were in the area. Indians burned her house down at one point, trying to drive her off the frontier because they were loyal to the British. And so that's going to be the third one. That'll be done this year. I'm already working on funding for 6 or 7 others. All of them with some Vermont history, but most of them direct Rutland history. It has been really easy to get people involved. It's been really easy to raise money for these things. I used to be on the Audubon Vermont board, and the best lesson I ever learned about raising money is all you have to do is ask. It's remarkable. People think it's really, really hard to raise money for things like this, but business wants to be supportive of their communities. People with money want to be supportive of their communities, and you just have to figure out who the right people to ask are, and then just start asking. And the more you do it, it's like anything. It sounds really scary at first, but the more you do it, the easier it gets. And it's remarkable how simple it is to do it. The Anne Story one, most of my family does not live in Vermont. They're spread all over the country. I have 40 cousins, but we were centered here in Rutland. My grandparents lived in Rutland, and my grandfather died in 1928. And when he died, his wife, my grandmother, was pregnant with twins, and they already had 7 kids, the oldest 16 years old. So when he died, just before the stock market crashed, beginning of the Depression, the city of Rutland embraced them and really carried that family. And in those days, people would often send their kids to an orphanage if one parent died, and she was able to keep them together. So we have a real deep connection. And when I pitched this Anne Story idea, I wanted to get a third one going because I really wanted to create a lot of momentum in this process. So I sent an email. I called a few cousins who I knew had money and who really love Rutland. And I'm not kidding, this is no joke. In the span of an hour, one afternoon, I got 3 cousins to each commit to $5,000 towards the sculpture. They don't know anything about Anne Story. They just know they love Rutland. So I really encourage it. Just dig in, start doing the work. I know you've already started, but this stuff really can have a huge impact. And people are talking about these sculptures already. Ultimately, I truly believe it's going to become a tourist attraction when we get 10 or 12 of them. People who are interested in history in Vermont, who are maybe passing by Rutland, will stop and look at this stuff and spend their time. And as I did in Rapid City, we intended to leave. We ended up spending an entire day walking around downtown Rapid City. We shopped in stores, we had lunch, we spent hundreds of dollars we never would have intended to spend in that city if not for this public art stuff. And I can tell you the pride that that community has over that public art thing is huge. And I think Rutland Blooms, although it's a much smaller scale, has really created a level of pride that was not there. And Rutland, if Rutland has one central problem, if I could put my finger on it, it's a lack of pride in the community, and oftentimes a negative internal feeling about the community. People in Rutland are super critical of their city, and slowly that's changing. Project Vision has had a huge impact on it. It is a dramatically different place today than it was at the beginning of that work that Jim and Chris have been so integral in. And I think Rutland Blooms, a very simple effort, has made a big difference in just how people think about their street, their gateways to the community, and ultimately I think it's going to really change the way people feel about the downtown, which, as you probably know, has struggled in the recent past. It's coming back now, but it's had some really tough times over the years. I think at the beginning of Project Vision, the downtown had an occupancy rate around 72%, and today it's in the mid-90s. So it's come a long way, still a long way to go, but I think the pride is definitely coming back, but it's definitely going to be a long-term commitment to do it. So, in a nutshell, that's what we've been doing with Rutland Blooms, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or I can get out of your hair so you can move on to other stuff.
Questions for Steve?
I've got a quick one. What do you do about painting situations where it might be a building that the landlord's not going to paint, but you know it's an eyesore?
Yep.
Do you move in and just take care of the painting yourself and say, let's call it even?
We've been really focused specifically in the Rutland Blooms thing on planting and art, public art, but we have encouraged owners. There's been a really cool effort in Rutland that I haven't been directly involved in, other than that I commissioned one, doing murals on buildings, so places that really look ratty, get some public art on them. They actually can look a lot better. What we have found where we've done improvements to housing is the people around them have quickly don't want to be the one eyesore on the street or in a little block or whatever. So that's had an impact. But I don't see why you couldn't create a volunteer program really similar. It may not be planting crab apples. It may be painting houses that need painting. Get painted, get donated. Call Sherwin-Williams or manufacturers. Those guys are always looking for opportunities to do stuff. I don't want to give it away, but we're about to announce a really cool project that we're doing in Rutland GMP with some other partners, and it's about a $400,000 project, and well over $200,000 of it is from donated labor and materials from businesses, and again pulled together in a span of a few weeks. Just asking people for help. People want to help. People who love their community. No one's ever asked them to do that, And if you start asking and you start showing some commitment, you will get results. I promise it will happen. Ladies first.
I just had a quick detailed question,
Sure.
Not big picture. Did you plant all your trees on public property or were some of them on private?
The vast majority are on private or public property, but we have planted a few on private property. Again, the city forester has chosen all of the locations. I don't pretend to be an arborist and know where these things should go or what types of or anything. That doesn't mean you couldn't do it on private property. His experience, he said the reason he wanted to do it on private is so that he can maintain them and make sure they get the water they need in the first year, make sure they're trimmed properly for the first few years and things like that. I think eventually we're going to run out of public property, and there's going to be some opportunities for sure to do it on some private. And we do get requests every year when we announce what we're doing. Invariably, I'll get a couple of calls or emails from people asking if we'd plant a tree or two on their property, and I'm keeping a list of them in case we ever get to that point. But
Thank you.
Was any consideration ever given to producing or planting trees that would produce an edible product?
I honestly can say I don't think so. I've largely, Dave Schneider is the city forester, has chosen all of the plants, specifically exactly what species of crab apples and maples and what have you, and he's got very specific reasons on why he has chosen what he has. In a more rural setting, that might make a lot of sense. I think he's very cognizant. One of his big concerns is both for the people planting them and then for taking care of them. Most of the places we're planting are where there's a lot of traffic, a lot of cars, and he's been very cognizant of the fact that he doesn't want people coming, to pick apples or whatever, where there's cars 2 feet away and no sidewalk, which is like the gateways. There's no sidewalks on most of the gateway areas in Rutland where we've done a lot of these plantings.
Who handles the ongoing long-term maintenance and who covers the cost for any of that?
The city of Rutland is responsible for maintaining them once they're planted. In fact, everything we're doing, we treat it as a gift to the city. So like these sculptures are all going to be on public property as well, and we're giving them to the city. We've had the conversations in advance with the alderman and the mayor, and they are helping us select the locations where they're going to go. But once they own it, they'll be covered by the city's blanket insurance policies. And there's not much you have to do to them to take care of them. They're marble. They'll last many lifetimes. Probably wash them every couple of years if you start getting some dirt on them and grit. But that's about it. And the trees, again, the city forester, they have a program in place to trim. And again, he selects stuff that once it gets to a certain size, it really won't keep growing. So he selects stuff, especially if there's power lines. That's something we're obviously concerned about. He selects species that won't grow high enough to get up into the lines and become a problem, that won't grow out into the street. So when he plants them, when he selects the hole spots, he knows how wide these things are going to get, and he knows they're not going to get to the street. So even if he misses trimming them a couple of years, that's not going to be a problem. But any other questions?
Mayor, anything to add to it?
Negative.
Okay. So just before Steve sits down, what I ask you to think about is, Steve's talking about trees, and I just want to make a point that he made. So when I was the chief in Rutland, he talked about the northwest section of the city. It was a real challenged area. And when I first got to the city, we were in the 80th percentile of our calls for service were coming out of this 8-block area that Steve. So out of the entire city, 80% of our calls for service were coming out of an 8-block area. And it was a major challenge to deal with. What I don't want you to lose in this conversation is this is more than just trees. So the trees could be something else. The carvings that Steve's talking about could be something else. What I saw happen, and again, I left very early on before it's gotten to the point that Steve's described. What I saw happen in the northwest section of the city, I don't care where you are anywhere in America where there's issues around challenged areas, and some of the reason why we came together as a group, as a reminder, is that there's a few sections in our town where we've allowed things to happen that are not really good for our community. And what I saw happen in the northwest section is, once those trees started getting planted, and there was a community garden that Steve didn't talk about that came up in one of the neighborhoods, what you started seeing is that the citizens in those neighborhoods that had been hiding in their houses for months at a time started coming out and participating in the conversation. And that's the energy that got built up. So even though Steve's talking about, and Alan, I like your idea about, okay, is there a way to do fruit-bearing trees, for example, or whatever the case may be. It's more than just, the trees are just one example of an environmental change that made a difference. If that makes sense to you. That's the reason why I asked Steve to come down. Because for the new folks, what we try to do every time we meet is have a guest speaker that kind of sparks our brains a little bit to think about what we can do in town to make a difference. The other thing is, Steve's 100% right. I was an outsider in Rutland. One of the things that struck me was just how negative people were about their community. Well, hello, I have conversations in this town where people are negative about this town. And sometimes that negativity feeds upon itself. And I was always blown away with how negative people were. You could have one single car break-in, and it was a crime wave to them. I mean, it was like things are out of control, the police department's doing nothing about it, this is insane. And then when you took a look at the crime stats, the numbers were going down. And so that negativity becomes very simple. These simple things of changing the environment. And the last thing I'll say is, what Steve was talking about is that I've told people this story. And if you're familiar with Rutland at all, where Walmart's Plaza is, in the summertime, we used to have couch surfing kids hanging out in the park there. And we had more problems in that park. And it was all tied to the fact, and I was telling Alan and Amy this morning at a meeting, there were benches there, and there was outlets, electric outlets that were there for the farmers markets there on the weekends, and they were live. So the kids that would couch surf, that were challenged kids in the community that we were dealing with all the time, would come there, hang out in the park all day, charge up their electronics, because God, they didn't have a place to live, but they had a $1,000 iPhone, and they had to charge it somewhere. And one day I'm in my office in Rutland, and I hear the beat officer is in a fight, and he's getting beat up pretty bad in the park, so we all go rushing over there. And it was a young lady who was a challenge, and she gets in the car, she kicks the wind out of the cruiser. He's the mayor at the time. I called him and I said, I've had enough of this. Okay, the benches are going, the power's going off, we're going to keep them out of there, no more hanging in the park because it's affecting the economy. People wouldn't come to the mall. They wouldn't come downtown to the shopping plaza because of this one little area. So this was early on my term. I was there 3 years. After we took those benches out, shut the powers out, we never had another complaint there because we changed the environment.
If I can, the rest of the story on that one. There is a Paul Harvey rest of the story on the benches. As she said, and that's why I stood up, I was going to tell this little anecdote, so I'm glad he set it up. At the same time, the spark that Rutland had, a bad spark, lit under our butt to really say no more, was when a young gal named Carly Farrell was killed in Rutland, leaving one of her 3 part-time jobs as a junior in high school. She was a shining star. And her dad was picking up one of her jobs, and the guy huffing passed out, ran into the car as her dad was picking her up and killed her as she was getting out of one of her 3 part-time jobs. And after we, took some pretty significant hits for yanking those benches out of the park because it was not an environment that was maintaining the standards of the community and the values of our community. Carly's mom, I talked to her, about a year later, and she wanted to start doing some projects. Again, not unlike Rutland Blooms, to have an impact in the community and change the environment to modify individuals' behaviors. And I said she wanted to put purple benches because Carly's the Purple Angel Foundation. And I said, how about if we put a bench back in that park and we reclaim that space for the community? So when we put that one bench out, we said, the behaviors that were being modeled here before do not uphold the values and the standards of this community. Carly Farrell and the Carly Farrell Foundation lived by the mantra of be kinder than necessary. So we said this bench is going to signify her spirit, and this community is going to take back that space and not allow those behaviors. And if anyone is doing things that don't uphold the standards of the community, they will be dishonoring her memory, and the community committed itself to make sure that we were going to call people out if those behaviors came back. There's now 4 benches there, and as Chief said, as far as I know, and at least until I left my job back last March, there had been no more calls for service. And now my family business is in downtown Rutland, and the behaviors this past summer, the behaviors have not returned, where there are people there who will go and sit and eat lunch where they wouldn't before. And so that was the point Steve was making, was changing the environment to modify individuals' behaviors, and that's what Chief is talking about as well. So that was the change to Rutland's environment in Depot Park. Was successful because the community committed itself to making sure that that space demonstrated or signified the values of the community. Fair enough?
Yes, thank you. Questions, comments? So anyway, just again, every month we try to have a speaker to kind of stimulate the ideas. I know Florence, myself, and Don have talked about this a lot, about environment. And so hopefully as part of the committee work, we can start building on some of these conversations in that background. Steve, I want to thank you again. It's a long ride.
Thanks for letting me.
Before we move on, anything else just along those lines for any feedback at all? Just for the point of conversation, opportunity for people to talk. Okay. All right, so as I said, normally what would happen now is I would ask people to break out into committees, but I know, Hooper, you're here, but 3 of the other chairs are not here. So I don't know how much work would get done. So what I thought we would do is have a report out right now on a couple areas, and maybe Florence, I could start with you to talk about. Dr. Sherman couldn't be here tonight, who chaired up the school committee, but Florence worked on that committee. Other folks from the school committee here, I don't see anybody else from the school committee. Maybe Florence, you could report out.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Sure. Dr. Sherman's working at the hospital tonight.
Can you
So,
do it?
yes.
Thank you.
This will be very brief. We filed our report, our study committee report for Act 46 and 49. Well, we presented to the school board in late November, early December. They voted on it. It got sent to the state. It's on the BVSU website if you want to read it, if you don't have a copy. And what the next steps are as far as what that report happens to that report is the Secretary of Education will review it, is going to review everything in the state, and she's going to come up with a grand plan of a statewide design of supervisory unions, and she's going to do that by June 1st. At that time, the State Board of Education, that report will go to the State Board of Education, and they will make the final decision. But they're obviously going to take a lot of her recommendation. The State Board of Education will take testimony and from different towns, if we want to give testimony and more information, or if they need more information. One significant thing about our report was we did build a relationship with North Bennington, and they put in their study report that they would like to join the BVSU. So hopefully that will generate some interest. They're kind of an outlier in the Southwest Supervisory Union. It might be a good solution to move them to the BVSU, hopefully, and that hopefully we'll be able to pick up a few students from them as well. They want to go choice K through 12. They're choice K through 6 right now. So, any questions?
I have a question. So, aside from the supervisory union part, I thought the whole curriculum part was really exciting, and so I'd be interested in an update on like what the next steps for that are.
That's a great question. I think personally, what the next step is to take an inventory of what our assets in the town are, and the whole idea is the Pathways project, which we have to do as a school. Instead of just checking the boxes, actually trying to figure out, okay, how can we create pathways for our students in the community? We don't want to burden teachers more, Hooper, that's not the goal, but it's to maybe find some concrete ways to apply what's being taught in the classroom for students in the community. And we have a tremendous amount of resources, from the INS to Orvis to MAC to, just carpentry, plumbing, electricians. So it's really up to the school board. We need to, help them. I'm hoping that maybe they'll appoint another committee to work on this and to figure out how, what the next steps are. Of course, any committee would always report back to them, and they would make the final decisions. But yeah, we need to get some energy behind that. I think we're just having a little hangover from all the work on the study committee report. But you're right, we need to get going on the next phase. So.
The school did start, Matt. We do have a committee right now on the Act 77 as part of that outreach. I think right now it's just at the level of what resources we're currently, CDC, we do have a handful of kids doing internships now. And then that committee too, which is pretty much teachers, is also looking at, one of the big challenges really is scheduling all this stuff.
I know.
Because, just because of school size, we don't have, if you're a senior, there's not 3 periods a day to take English. So I think we're looking at it from the school end, how do we make that more, those opportunities more accessible for students that want to take advantage of them, while also meeting some of the academic criteria. So at the school, that's
a group of teachers meeting right now?
Yeah.
So they work with Dr. Arlington on the curriculum development, or are you just early on?
Yeah, all of it. We're part of that, the curriculum development. I mean, there's a lot to it now with all the switch over to proficiency-based stuff. So there's a whole group of teachers. Marshall Cross is on that group too. So Marshall he may be someone for you. He was on the school committee. So he's also on the committee at the high school. So.
Right, if you want help from people, we're willing to help however we can. Or different people, from the committee, or new people from the community who would be able to do that, are willing to help, I think. But I think somehow getting the assets of the community, and figuring out who wants to participate, who could help with students, what they're willing to do, would give you some information maybe that would be helpful. So.
I would encourage anybody that hasn't seen that report to access it. And where can you
it's bvsu.org, and then when you pull down, I think it's under school board, but there are different subtitles at the top, and there's one that I think it's minutes from the school board or documents, and if you hover over that, and, we could also, for people that aren't willing to go or can't go on the website, we could make some copies and put them down at the town clerk's office. I think that might be a good idea.
It's an excellent report that costs the community absolutely nothing except the time that people put into it. I think their findings were remarkable, and it was a tremendous effort.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bill, I think, again, just for the folks that are new, one of the things that we got really tangled up with when we first started this group was this self-study, because we were under pressure from the deadline from the state to deliver a report. And we worked with the school board to allow them to let a group of folks here become the self-study group. And it was amazing the work that went into it. And, Florence had a huge piece of this, as did Dr. Sherman and everybody else that worked on the committee. And I think this piece about, Nicole was supposed to come tonight, but she gave me an email earlier. Nicole Whalen, the chair of the school board. And I told her that I want to try to get together with her to figure out how can we as a group continue this conversation, because this pathway thing fits into everything else that we're talking about in the community. And so for people that aren't familiar with Act 77, it's really the state's push to focus in on career pathways for individual students and building those pathways early on in school and using the assets in the community. And when you see the report, the thing that's very unique about the report that Amy talked about, that I think is unique, is that there was really a focus by the group to focus in on what we knew for assets and gave clear examples of how we could do, for example, science, math, technology by working with MAC as an example. But what we don't have is a good inventory. And before we're done here tonight, Alan and Amy I met with Amy and Alan this morning. They've done some good work through the economic development. We're going to talk about the fact that one of the next steps is trying to figure out who we have in our community, because we really don't know. And so this ties all back to Act 77. Because I think after being involved in this report process and watching the committee slave away at this, the self-study group, if we don't get really creative with how we're going to stand out amongst the other schools, we're probably going to be forced into a situation that we don't want in town. Now, maybe some folks do, but I would hate to see that school stand empty up on that hill. It would be an awful shock to this town. And so Act 77 is an incredibly important piece of this. And I don't mean to steal the thunder. I had asked Tim Stewart to come tonight, but Tim had a personal commitment tonight because I don't know if you all saw this, right? And I just think it speaks to the courage and the social fiber in our community. But we had this awful thing happen at the school, right? Pipe burst, destroyed the gym floor. But a bunch of citizens got together and saved the eagle out of the middle of that floor. And it's being stored right now. And I wanted Tim just to talk about, because sometimes this goes back to what Steve and the mayor were talking about earlier. We get down on ourselves, but when the bell rings, people stood up and they became involved. And I wanted Tim to talk about that spirit. And hopefully he'll come to another meeting in the future. He couldn't make it tonight because of a personal commitment. But that school is the centerpiece, and I think we have to get over this hangover from the self-study and figure out how we, as a group of citizens working in the community, can get together with the school board and fit into what's going on internally and bring the external piece internally to come up with a better plan around Act 77. So I didn't mean to steal it.
I think one other thing that's key, which is not necessarily substantive, but we have to get the word out about our school and what successes we're having and what good things are happening. And the one thing GNAT was great in publicizing this, the spelling bee, the girls that won the spelling bee in 7th and 8th grade, statewide, all sizes of school. There was an interview on GNAT of every one of the girls. They represented our town so well. It was, and we need to get the word out about what the great things that are happening, the great education that's happening in our school. And, it's a shame we have to do that, but everybody else is doing it, and we have to make sure that people understand what we have to offer.
Any question on the school stuff? Any feedback? So I think, again, that committee's not here tonight because Dr. Sherman had to work in the emergency room at the hospital, but I think we'll probably have a side conversation about how we can get more involved, and Nicole and I have agreed in an email tonight that I'll connect with her, see what the next steps are. And I'll put in this selfish little plug here for the town, but elections are coming up. I know there's vacancies coming up on the school board. It's incredibly important that if you know people that are willing to serve, that you encourage them to run for elected office, because it's going to become crucial about the future of the school and where the school is going to be. Jerry.
I've sat on the school board on and off for many years, and I've also been a select person here in town. And almost without a doubt, every time I left a school board meeting, there was great things that had happened, great things that we try to do, and places we try to get to be. As opposed to being a select board member, that's like business as usual. We have a great school system, and I agree with Florence. One of our biggest problems is we don't, as a community, hear of all the great things. I love going in Fisher School, all the things these kids do, artwork and stuff. It's amazing. And Hassel and Jen Tafee there, they've helped out. But I would encourage people, highly encourage people, take a shot at the school board or the select board. Now, I was instrumental in changing the format from 2 years to 1 year terms. And I did that, and I tried to do it when I was on the board 30 years ago. And the thought behind it is, if you want to run for the school board and you're not quite sure how it's going to be, you can go for 1 year. That way, because a lot of people don't want to quit. You wouldn't quit. And at the end of the year, if it was not for you, fine. But if it was, you could run again. And I think that's worked pretty well. We've had some changes, but we haven't had a lot of changes. Give it a shot. It's very gratifying on the school board, believe it or not. Great things happen. Okay, you have controversy like you do everywhere, but there's so many great things. I just think, throw your hat and try. I think most people would like it, at least for 1 year.
Any other feedback on the school? Again, maybe what we do next month, I may know. Maybe we can, because again, sometimes, maybe we can get the report up to town hall, but we can bring some copies in for next month too. So people can, it was an incredible amount of work. And so we kind of hung over from that. Hoop, could I ask you to maybe talk a little bit about activities and recreation? And maybe Dave can join you in the conversation and introduce that.
Yeah. Well, we actually, I
Can you
don't
go
know.
to the podium?
Oh, boy.
Because I really want to see you out there.
We've actually, as a committee and a group, I think when we broke down the first time, numbers-wise, we were 3 times larger than everybody else. So actually things got going. We've been to some rec park meetings, and I've talked to a couple different groups, a VOREC group and some other places. I've had a lot of help in as things broke down. The plan tonight was actually to see a couple, to have the committee look at a couple of things that we've been working on. We've got, actually we're going to break down into some subcommittees and
So how many rec committee people are here too? Anybody rec committee? Okay. All right, so maybe towards the end you could break off.
Yeah, we could do, I think just a couple of things we're working on. We've got, Nikki right here, she met with Jim Henderson and her and Dave and sat down and sort of did an inventory on public lands, state-owned, town-owned, and look at opportunities there outside of the rec park. We had a good meeting with the rec park committee, started looking at some of the things that we're looking to do. I think one of the big things that came out of it is this idea that the rec park really needs a rec director, someone to begin to look at ways to set up programs there. And I think a lot of the discussion and stuff at the park committee was older people in the committee talking about 20, 30 years ago how much activity was at the rec park and the opportunities at the rec park, and how some of those opportunities have sort of gone away as different people who led them left. So those are the things we're looking at. And then just the other day too, I got a proposal from a community member that is wondering about possibly getting some space down at the Yellow Barn. She wants to do a community flower gardens that she would do. It is Terrio Day, and she's actually getting Brianna Einzig, who's a teacher at the high school. I think they were classmates long ago. Brianna at the high school works with some of the farm to table stuff that they do at the school, and actually one of these past pathway plans was to set up some community gardens that students could work at that were interested during the year. So those are some of the kind of the points that we're on, and we're sort of looking to break down into committees. I had actually called Jerry and talked to Jerry, and Dean was pretty instrumental about creating like a park improvements committee that would look at things we're doing. The rec park committee, the parks rec park group under Dave. So we actually were looking at changing our name because there's a lot of rec committees.
Because again, so I met early on with Dave and Chris Barlow, who is now, Chris is titled the president of the rec, right? This confusion about we stood up a rec committee as part of the Renewal project when there's already an existing recreation committee that has been established for a long time. So we do need to address that at some point. So because we don't want this to be confusing. We want to find activity opportunities in the community that will bring people into the community, have people interested. So I think when you talked about some of the research you did on public-private lands, is around the issue of like creating biking opportunities, mountain biking opportunities. Where we can draw folks into town. You know, if the mayor was still here, he would tell you that, again, in Rutland, I would have never thought one of the biggest mountain biking locations in Vermont is in the city of Rutland, Pine Hills. It brings hundreds of people into the city every year. And you would never know that. And that was in the Northwest neighborhood, where people would be, quote unquote, scared because of the reputation of the neighborhood to go there. We had to change that dynamic in order to do economic development. So I think that's what I heard you said when we had talked on the phone that day. So I would, it sounds like to me, Hoop, that, and again, I'll just make the statement, because the other three of the chairs are not here tonight, but trying to narrow this down to how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, narrowing this down to doable stuff so we can get some victories, I think is important. And so it sounds like maybe even the barn thing with Terry, because I know Terry has a real interest in the farm to table stuff.
Yep. And we do have, we did talk at the last rec park group. They are starting a plan. They've got a grant.
We're going to
apply for a grant to
resurface the walking trail and add some benches along it within the park.
So that was one of the things we sort of discussed as well.
So I actually have a question. Is anybody looking at the dog park part of the rec park? Because I can't tell you the number of people that I've said, yeah, there's a dog park there and nobody even knows about it. And that's people who live in Arlington. And I mean, all it is right now is a field. I take my dog to the Manchester Dog Park because I take her to Arlington, there's never a dog there for her to play with. She can play by herself in my yard. I don't have to take her to a dog park for that.
There hadn't been any, no discussion that we had necessarily.
I might be willing to join you to look into that.
Have you been to the dog park?
I have been to the dog park.
It's quite boring down there.
It's very close. I'm a human, you know, I mean, but my dog is bored, so, you know.
A couple of years ago, we tried it for winter on the softball field. I'm supervisor at the park, you know, right at the moment. And the hardest part that we had was great people came there with their dogs and pets and took care of them. But there was a few that didn't.
Yeah, and that happens there.
Nothing worse than trying to get your dog in the car, just roll the other dog's business.
Yeah. But again, I mean, the only other dog park I've been to here is Manchester. And
there all the time.
And they have, maybe this dog park is too big.
I know there's signs, the town has signs right now that say dog park. And they're supposed to be putting them up, but the last meeting we went to a month ago, nothing got put up.
Yeah, but I mean, I have some ideas, so.
Just simply, I think more, I'm down there every day, at least 3 hours a day. Because since I retired, I'm training a dog.
Oh, okay.
Yes, she's being trained.
Can I bring my dog to you? Oh, when are you there? Yeah, when are your hours? When is that free training?
Every time I run into somebody, they're like, oh my God, I didn't even know about this. But, you know, more and more people are finding out about it. And it's phenomenal when you meet other people down there. It's just great.
Yeah. Question for you, of all the places you've been, you don't mind the walk from?
I don't mind the walk, but I'm sure that there are older people that probably have.
I don't want to walk all the way down there.
A bit of an issue that.
That's what the park is for walking. That's
well,
what the trails are for.
Yeah.
For our health.
Yeah. No, it doesn't bother me. You know, but yeah, signs. But there's some ideas that I think could be incorporated. And hey, I don't have any problem going on a Petco and saying, give me $5,000 for the Arlington Pet Park, and we'll call it the Petco Pet Park. I don't care. I know.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. David, anything to add to that? I mean, you talked about the grant.
Well, we got pre-approval on the grant. It's an 80-20 match, so the state puts up 80% of the money. And right now, the way we're talking, the Arlington Rec and Park Committee will put up the other 20%. No guarantees until you get the letter back from the state, which would come in about June, I guess. They would notify us that we received it or not. So, you know, it's hopeful, but.
I use that trail a lot, not so much in the winter, but in the summer, for sure. So, Okay. I'm going to save economic development to last. Jamie, you're on public safety, right?
Yep.
And you know, Alex got summoned to northern Vermont to prosecute a case up north, so he couldn't be here. Is there anything to report out from that committee?
Well, at our first meeting, the big thing between the fire department and the rescue squad was recruitment and retention of younger members. I mean, Tony and I are that 50 age and over, and that's where a lot of our members are for both departments. Also, the need to get into a building that will take us into the future. Because right now, the rescue squad's got a building that's falling apart. Our building is not suiting our needs with the new mandates and requirements that the government is putting on us and NFPA. We both need to find a facility that's going to work for us into the future. So those are kind of the two priorities that we discussed.
Okay. Has there been any more conversation about the building, or is it still just kind of...
You'll see it in my town report, but I did put a little bit in that. We've looked at several properties. We do have the Dietrich Trailer Park north of town that the town has offered to us. It's got few guys really like the property, a lot don't. It's got pros and cons both ways. It's free, but on the other hand, it's a location that maybe not the best place. We are still looking for property, trying to find a location. We thought we had Warmbrook and East Arlington Road intersection, and then the state came in and hammered us with wetlands, which put a kibosh to it, because that was the perfect property for us. Still within reach of the schools, still central for the highway, Sunderland, everything. So we are still looking. If anyone knows of a piece of property, I mean, we're looking for at least 5 acres. And we've had discussion in the past with the rescue squad about combining forces and moving into one building as opposed to 2 buildings, and so that we have a fire or an emergency services facility.
Maybe you and I can have a coffee one day just to talk about how can we as a group, because this is an important piece of the public safety.
Yes.
I mean, it is important. Not only on the recruitment piece, but I think this fits into the Act 77 stuff. You know, getting, you know, I'm going to date myself here. I will tell you tomorrow's my birthday, but I'll leave it at that. When I was growing up, being on a junior rescue squad and feeding, the ability to be able to feed that, I think that's a huge piece of it. It's an opportunity on Act 77 that we probably haven't pursued. So maybe you and I can have a coffee one day.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 7 juniors right now on the fire department. I think there's 3 working with the rescue squad.
All right.
It's really good for the younger people. Tony has been really good with our junior program in leadership there and getting them to drills and trainings and stuff. But I mean, it's hard to get the volunteers too, and that's the other aspect. Is the first thing you've got to do within the first 2 years is take a 190-hour course that's over 6 months, nights and weekends, and that's a state mandate.
But I think your facility is a big part of it.
They are, because we don't have the training facility, we don't have the room for the training. I mean, we're supposed to have physical fitness at the stations. We don't have any room for that. I mean, our internet access is horrible. Our trucks, because our manpower is dwindling, our trucks are getting bigger so that they can do more with fewer, and they don't fit in the station. Or if you come out, you're all the way on the sidewalk on the other side before you can make the turn. That building worked great the last 50 years, but now we're moving into a location, into an era that we've got to go bigger to do our job. Rescue squad's in the same boat. I mean, their squads are getting a little bigger every time they get a new one.
So maybe you need help in this conversation. So when do you and I plan on having a coffee at some point? All right. Thanks for that, because I know Alex, you had emailed me, you said he couldn't be here tonight. The other thing I talked to Alex about is, that's on the fire rescue side of the public safety issue, is just as a reminder, you know, this thing kind of got jump-started because of Mrs. Jones's homicide. And one of the things I talked to Alex about is getting some good statistics every month about what's going on in town as far as vandalisms, you know, burglaries, whatever the case may be. Some good idea of what's happening in town so people have that view of that. Because I think that openness kind of puts some conversations to bed and how rumors get started and those kind of things. So that's something I did talk to Alex about on the committee. The Arts Committee, Clint is not here. So I know very little about this because I wasn't able to hook up with Dr. Josh Sherman is also involved in the arts. And you probably saw this in the paper. And I'm hoping maybe we can get Josh to report out on this a little bit more next month. But the Four Freedoms, the Norman Rockwell paintings, are touring the country. They're going to be coming to the area, and they're planning events in town. And what I'd asked Josh to do is really try to get the local businesses into this conversation about how the inns and, you know, the gas stations and the restaurants can be part of this conversation. This is a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal that the celebration of the Four Freedoms of Norman Rockwell was part of our history, which goes back to kind of what Steve Costello was talking about, what your history is. And that's a big part of our history, that art scene. So that is coming, and I think it's the weekend of like July 19th. I don't have my calendar here with me. We'll make sure we get that, get an update for the bigger group. But that's a big event coming up. And I think, again, awareness of that and planning for that and getting involved in that is an important piece.
So just to touch on that, Clint did talk with us about our carnival that we do every year. And I think it's actually going to be 2 weekends for them. Our carnival is the 20th and 21st. And the way he talked, the Rockwell stuff was going to be the weekend before, the 13th, 14th, and the following weekend, the 27th, 28th. Which is going to encompass
draw people in the town in July, how we promote that, right? And get that on some type of calendar, which I don't want to steal the thunder of the conversation with Al and Amy here in a minute. The other committee is Todd Wilkinson's Committee on Town Government, and they've been meeting, and Todd reported back to me. Todd's coaching a basketball game tonight, so he couldn't be here. That one of the things that their committee is really focusing in on is that the need for revitalizing the report that was done. Jerry, you may remember this. You may have been on the board about 4 or 5 years ago. That was done about a town administrator.
That was done a little, I wasn't on the board, it was done a little prior to that, but it was Kevin Daly and another gentleman.
So this committee is feeling like that conversation has to happen again.
Absolutely.
And so that's their focus and what they're focusing in on. And again, I mean, obviously it's going to involve talking with the select board, and I think after the next coming election, once we figure out who's on the select board, and you know, I know sitting down and trying to get that, and I think it's going to take citizens' interest maybe to bring that back to the forefront, because it's important. So that's the town committee, and he's got huge. I did not recognize that. Wow.
They're back. Todd could be here.
Todd could be here. The basketball game's over. Did you win?
2 points.
2 points.
You lost or you won? You won by two. Oh, you lost by 2 points.
See, that's your coach, man. Your coach. So anyway, so that's the town piece, and Alan, and that brings us down to the economic development piece. So if the two of you would like to kind of chat a little bit about what we talked about this morning.
Can you guys, because we're going to send this out to the whole town, can you stand up?
Sure.
Alan, you look great on camera too.
Yeah, sure.
I've got a special filter on tonight. Everyone's 20 years younger.
I don't have my makeup
Awesome.
on. Go Go ahead.
I made notes. I do have some notes. So the Economic Development Committee, we've had a couple of meetings and our group has been growing, which is great. And we've had a lot of really good ideas. It's a huge topic that could go on forever and will go on forever. So as Jim said, we need to focus on things that we can do first, just to start. And so we've been looking at making our economic development in terms of living here, working here, and having people visit here. And so, I think a long time ago, people would say that economic development would be bringing new businesses into the area. But I think we're really working on thinking about tending our own garden, doing a locals to locals kind of push, looking at our current businesses and how can we as businesses support each other, support other businesses, and how can we encourage people in town to support our local businesses. And so our first step in that is to develop a business listing, basically, of all of the businesses in Arlington. And there's the ones we can see, and then there's the ones that we can't see because they're people that are working at home but are still still could be really great assets for our area. So we would like to develop a listing that is public and totally wide open, and put it online or have it at the town offices that people could use to buy from local businesses, and that people moving into town would know, hey, I need somebody to mow my lawn. Who's local? They don't know that necessarily. So we'd like to do maybe in March have some sort of I don't want to call it a mixer, but some sort of a gathering where we say, okay, everybody who has a business, come, let's get together, bring your business cards, let's start this process of talking to each other about what we all do. And how we can support each other. So that's, one part of it. And then the other part of it is that we really think we need some sort of a website to help us coordinate amongst ourselves, but also tell the story of Arlington to people who are moving into town or coming to visit, and really put out the public relations about how great Arlington is and what our story is for a lot of different people. So our second push is to find somebody in town a local person who can develop a website. And so if any of you guys know a website developer in town, we want to know who they are, because there's a great opportunity here. We have a great place to live, and we have a great school, and we just need to be able to say it, to put it out there. So I think that's...
I think to parlay on that, I think we need to talk to each other, as I said at the last meeting, and I've been running my mouth a lot. And I just keep adding people and emails, and whenever I get a little bit of resistance that somebody's not interested in attending meetings, I always say, can we put you on an email list? Can we send you agendas? Can we send you minutes? Can we keep you in the loop? Can you stay informed, so that then you know what's going on, and then if a question comes up specific to your area of expertise or your interest, we're not getting people back up, from ground up, that they have a little background knowledge of what's going on. And in support of the local to local initiative, I thought, it came to light this morning, it would kind of be a tragedy if we went outside our community to Bennington, Albany, Rutland, Burlington to hire a web developer if we have somebody right in our community. So it's proving to be fairly challenging to develop our database. We don't have a real clear path about how to best organize that. It would be nice if we found maybe some sort of an online thing that people could do self-maintenance, tell the story of their business, update it, but then there would be some way of monitoring that. As with anything, getting businesses on there is great, but then updating them with changes, or if businesses leave or change. So there's a lot of work, I think, that needs to be done to maintain that once we get it up and running. Just about everybody that I've talked to really believes that there's a need for some way to disseminate that information and get it out so that it's handy and accessible, whether you're in real estate or insurance or whatnot. I hear that time and time again, that there's a great lack of knowledge about what we have for business activity in our community.
We have a name. Don Keelan had somebody from Sunderland who's a web designer. We have a name somewhere. Remember that email? I'll try to find it and send it to you.
We have a great department up to school. I mean, you're going to get the kids involved and all of this stuff. This is a good place to start.
It would be a pathway to learning, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be.
They got some great stuff up there. I mean, Nikki's fantastic and the other gentlemen, so.
And the other thing that we've kind of talked about is we don't want to supplant or duplicate what we've already got going. So would a website for this initiative include the school website, the town website? How would you get it all under one umbrella without supplanting what's already going on or duplicating what's, and it's a monumental task, probably beyond my technical comprehension, but somebody that does it would probably know how to do it well.
Any feedback, conversation about this? I think when I met with Amy and Alan this morning, for me, this is a huge piece. So Amy, tell me, you looked this up. How many LLCs are located in Arlington?
700. On the state website, you can look up the corporations and LLCs, and there are 700 LLCs in Arlington itself. So some of those are defunct. You know, they're people that did them and then never actually used them. But that's, you know, could you imagine that there are 700 businesses in Arlington? It's, you know, it's hard to think about that, but that's a lot of people, you know, doing all different kinds of things that we don't know.
So for me, as we talked this morning, I think this idea of, the idea came from, if you saw about a month and a half ago in Pownell, they actually got, some businesses just got together and just to start talking about what their businesses are. And so when we talked this morning, I think this is a big step for us to try to, and Alan, I think you put it best, and I want to, like, we don't know who is who. We don't know what businesses actually exist in town. And it'd be a great opportunity to get businesses together to start brainstorming, because we're never going to have a chamber of commerce here. We talked a little bit this morning about, you know, we need to do this because there's this, you know, the Manchester Chamber folded. Arlington had a Chamber of Commerce for history here many years ago. It gave in and went to Manchester. Manchester's folded, and now Bennington's trying to become a county-wide Chamber of Commerce. And I'm not sure how much attention Arlington would get. So it's not that we don't want to. It's not that we want to ignore those opportunities to grow businesses and bring people into town, but some of this I think we're going to have to do on our own. And as a result of that, I think the best way of doing that is the idea that Amy and Alan had, is getting these businesses together, have a mixer. Maybe we could do it here.
Absolutely.
You know, a place where people can just come and have a cup of coffee and a piece of cake and talk about what the opportunities are in town to build upon that. Because again, that feeds into the Act 77 stuff. And Jared, we will follow up on the school. One of the things we talked about this morning is you get a junior or senior working on this, and then maintaining the thing and the daily adding that has to go onto a web page or wherever could be a little challenging, but we will. I will follow up with Tim on a conversation about this. Anybody got anything to add to this? Because I think, again, to become a vibrant community, we got to have some activity here, and the activities to be around businesses. You know, I'll say this morning, this is a small example of it. I haven't been out and about in a while, and I'm driving down. I go by Mill Cones today, and I see where the Catamount Books is now moved into. used bookstores moved into this part of the old Cullinan space. I mean, who knows that? If you don't drive by and you don't see it, who knows that? And again, that could, again, a coordinated effort to kind of spin off other activity around that is important for us to do. So, any feedback, comments, or thoughts along those lines?
I'm a member of the Arlington Rec Park, and we had our fund drive about 3 years ago, I guess it was. And we have a list of, I think it's just under 200 people from the Arlington, Sandgate, and Sunderland. And I think most of the companies that we, the names that we have are companies. I think we have individuals that are actually, we could identify with those. So those would be available to cross, I would think they'd be available to cross-check with your list that you already have.
That would be great. That would be great. It would be a good place to, a good place to start, right?
Okay.
We do, I collected about 146 different businesses that I saw just driving around, shingles hanging out or signs on the side of cars. To be able to find contacts for them or emails, one of the ideas that we had was to send kind of a mailing out and ask everybody to think of 3 people or 3 businesses that they could add to that, just to kind of brainstorm and whatnot. I think there's a fair number of home-based businesses that aren't as visible, either people in computer or technology or computer consulting, and that kind of thing. And those are kind of the people that we want to bring light to. So.
Just again, Helen shared something with me this morning with the meeting. I'll just kind of give you this. So, and again, this goes to just local economy, keeping your business in town. And I'm hoping next month that I want to kind of line up our guest speaker next month to talk about creative economies in small communities and how you do that. And I've got a couple ideas about who could come in to talk about that. But when you spend $100 at an independent business, $68 of that's returned to the local community. When you spend that same amount at a national chain, it drops to $43. So again, when you're in a small community and you spend your resources here and those businesses come out of the darkness and you support those businesses, it's only going to be, the effect of that becomes much more powerful when you're spending your money there. I think that's quite a stunning statistic when I saw it. I think locally owned businesses reinvest in the local economy is 60% higher than chains and internet retailers. So again, supporting those businesses is important. Florence.
Just one thing, Jamie, when did you say the fire department carnival is? Because I looked up and it looks like the
19th, 20th.
That's when
That's the Four Freedoms Week.
That's the
19th
Four
through the
Freedoms. I
21st.
just looked it up, 19th through 21st. So I don't know whether that matters or not, or maybe it could be in conjunction with. And the other thing is, can I just put Victoria on the spot?
Sure.
To say something about how maybe you're, just any comments that you have and who you are.
I was getting to announcements here next.
Yeah.
So anything on the anything on the academy thing, we'll do announcements for Victoria. Okay, sorry. You're up.
Do I need to stand, Hoss?
No, I got you.
I don't do well when I'm standing. So, hello everyone, my name's Victoria Silsby. I'll just put it right out there. I don't live in Arlington, but I'm very passionate about Arlington. I remember as a kid growing up in Shaftesbury about all the time and how special it was to come up to Arlington, visit the Candle Mill Village, go for walks off of Kelly Stand and things like that. So it has a lot of near and dear memories to me. I'm also, I can't remember for how many years, but I did work at Mac Molding. So currently I work for a nonprofit. We are based in Londonderry, which seems like miles away, but we're actually
very dedicated and embedded in Bennington County. And the name of the organization is called The Collaborative. We're a nonprofit that promotes the healthy development of a community supporting substance-free youth. That is a mouthful. But basically, I'm here tonight, and I've been to a couple of your other meetings, to say that we're interested in seeing how we can partner and affect and support what Arlington Renewal Project is all about. I've met and talked with Florence. Colonel Baker is very familiar with the collaborative. I have some business cards. We manage a couple of grants that can that have included outreach to Arlington on a very small beginning outreach process, and there may be there's certainly some future dialogue that could happen to see where else we could partner and support Arlington. That being said, my big announcement is Manchester Community Library is hosting next Thursday, the 25th, the Opiate Effect, which is about a student at UVM who suffered from an overdose. You are all invited. Please tell your friends, your family, anyone that is involved with youth, parent, a teacher, a youth leader, anyone who has a grandchild. The film is not quite half an hour, right, Andrew? And then Andrew McKeever is going to be the moderator, and there'll be a small panel of about 4 or 5 people with professional experience that can add to the community discussion following. And I've brought a couple posters so that you can all take this information and distribute it in Arlington.
So I will say that much of my life has been dedicated to the issue of substance abuse, and you know, even going all the way back to when I was the station commander in Shasbury, going all the way back to working with the collaborative then. You know, this is a big issue, and you know, I'm not going to ask somebody to raise their hand here, but I would doubt very much that there isn't somebody in this room that doesn't either have somebody in their family or extended friendship that's dealing with an opiate issue, because it would be almost impossible not to be true.
I met someone tonight before I came here. I was at a meeting in Manchester, and she shared that her 35-year-old cousin has just recently passed away. He didn't live in this area. I don't believe he even lived in Vermont, but it's still someone that I know, someone who's got kids that are growing up in the community, and there she is sharing her story.
So I'm planning on going. I mean, I've seen the film, I've heard Skip, the father talk.
Yep.
I've actually met Skip.
Skip won't be at this screening. The film did air, I think, within the last few years on PBS. This is in conjunction with Vermont PBS.
Incredible story. His son was a hell of an athlete, downhill skier.
From Maine, right?
From Maine, yep. And his dad is a great guy. So I'm planning on going, just to say, you know, I've seen the film, but I want to listen to the panel discussion. You know, we can kid ourselves, but if you talk to the folks at school, especially Deanne down at the grade school, there are several kids that go to that school whose parents are suffering the disease, and the impact in the school is, you know, I just read in the paper yesterday, the College of St. Joseph in Rutland is going to start a training program on trauma. And again, going back to my experience in Rutland, they had to train all the teachers in the school system to deal with trauma as a result of the opiate issue, because the kids were coming into school so traumatized from the events. And again, it affects the community. I'm not saying that it's an outrageous problem here, but I think you heard Todd Wilkins talk, so it's an opportunity.
And many of the, even if you don't feel that the opiate or the heroin issue is of a concern to you immediately or in the community, you can translate much of the message to any substance, and it is the The intent of the screening is to focus on prevention and education.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being dedicated.
Is it appropriate for students as well, or not?
I'm going to answer that question how do I say this?
No.
No, that it's not appropriate for students, that it's very much a family conversation. So is it age appropriate? I can speak that sometimes it's appropriate to bring a sixth grader to an event like this, but that's based on that family and that sixth grader and the communication and the bond and the after discussion that the family is going to have. Sometimes it would not be appropriate to bring an 11th grader because of the, maybe because of the lack of communication that would happen after the film. I'm going to leave that up to a family decision.
Thank you.
I think you can see clips of it on, if you Google the opiate effect, you can see clips online about it. I'm not sure that you can see the whole video, but you can see clips so that you might be able to make a better decision. Andrew, do you have anything to add about the screening?
So the date and time again is, so just in case.
Next Thursday, the 25th, starting at 6:30 at Manchester Community Library.
You probably should ask me that question. We're going to shoot it, and we also have permission to show the movie as well. So after the fact, we will put that up, and we will put the movie up as well. So if you cannot make it that night, you can also check out the movie post and then decide if it's something you want to watch.
Does anybody else have any other announcements as we kind of wrap things up?
Oh, I guess I have something.
Sure.
Red Mountain Lodge of Masons here in Arlington is having a skating party on Saturday down at the rec park.
Right.
We're having hot dogs, free hot dogs, hot chocolate, and anybody's welcome to attend.
What time is that?
It's 10 to 2, I believe. 10 to 3, I'm not exactly sure. We're going to be there for a while, but we start at 10. It's in the news guide, I just didn't know if everybody had seen it.
I saw the news guide.
Is there a kind of announcements that just bring energy to the community? Thank you. Who else? Jerry.
As I mentioned, I'm commander of the post. This post is open to any of these committees. Just give me a shout. We have another room downstairs. If the whole committee can meet here. We're as of right now, we're planning on Thursdays, the third Thursday of every month. But if any singular committees want to get together, you don't have a place, give me a shout. We'll see that you get in and if you want to have a forum here to bring businesses in, we can do that. No problem, just let me know when. We do have some things on the calendar, but we're here for the community.
Any other announcements?
I'd just like to say I appreciate that the notice was in the news guide, because the last meeting I missed because I didn't know about it.
It's kind of getting the word out. I mean, this is why a web page is so important, and we've got to nail this down. I know I said this at the last meeting, but I kind of got sidetracked with some other issues, and we got to get this nailed down, because I think pushing people to a certain place, but that's the reason why. It's going to be the third Thursday of the month, 6:30, the American Legion. Let me ask you this. When I talked to Jerry about coming here, I felt like being at the school, if we were to break into committees tonight, we could drag the tables off in the corners and people could have conversations. It just seemed like this was a better space than trying to use the MAC. The theater is a wonderful place, but it's not conducive to this kind of meeting. So do people feel like this is a better spot? I think we can get a little creative with some coffee, and maybe I can bring some cookies and stuff in and make it a little bit more homey, but it just seemed to me that the space was a little bit better for us to be able to do business. If anybody thinks different, please let me know.
I think you'd have to monitor the turnout. I think the turnout that you had at the MAC Performing Arts Center might be hard to fit.
Yeah.
Right.
So if it looks like it's going to grow, but I think for the size group that we've got now, it's...
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Can I
Sure.
ask a communication question? Does Arlington have front porch forum?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
They do. Yes. Okay.
Melissa at the school also, if you're on her list, she always advertises it.
Okay, I don't have anything else, listeners. So, and again, I appreciate you coming out on a cold night. You know, I'm hoping that in the next couple of months, we start seeing some, you know, as the committee's narrowed down on the things that they want to tackle, and we start seeing this, I'm very optimistic about the economic. The school did a great job. We got to figure out what our next steps are. The rec folks are working very closely with the folks at the rec park, trying to figure out how to expand that. It's all part of the conversation that brings energy to the town. So thank you very much.